It's 5:24. I apologize for the delay. So, we're coming back from closed session. We went on item D, closed session, and there's nothing to report. Out of closed session, item E, reconvene to open session. Item F, announcement of actions taken in closed session. There was no action taken in closed session. Item G, comments from the public. The board will take any and all comments from the public related to the sole item on this agenda. And I have Diana Harvey to speak on her behalf regarding this item.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Diana Harvey. I'm a longtime employee here of this district and watched our finances go up and down and zoom up across the board. I'm here tonight because I know you're going to be listening to some bond proposals. I don't pretend to know all the academic language associated with the debt ceiling and the debt summary and all, but I do have minutes from a meeting in 2006 where another series of bonds were reissued, and I don't see them on your list of existing debt. So I just want to point that out. And maybe it is embedded in this, but I don't know that. My concern is, as you're listening to the bonds, you're not going to make any decisions tonight, right? Good. I've sat here before and listened to one of these companies make a presentation, and it was to refinance our existing debt. And we were going to have a huge balloon payment at the final end of it. I mean, I wouldn't even be here when that balloon debt came up, but I'm so glad our district did not succumb to the enticing that they got to refinance the existing debt we have and go with a lower payment, but a balloon payment at the very end. I think it would have imploded this district financially. That's my opinion. I'm happy to see that you're going to look at a bond. I believe we need a new high school. I have no doubt about that, but we do have an existing Camarena Junior High that's not finished. So I don't know if the $198 million aggregate money that you're going to borrow or plan to think about borrowing is going to include a new facility for Camarena. What I don't know also is if we're going to go after construction money after November when the new tax bonds are approved for construction, if we can apply then and get part of our facilities payments paid for through construction money. I mean, there's not any money there now, I understand, but after this election coming up, the fund will be replenished. And we used to worry about being on the list. I don't hear that talk anymore. Are we on the list? Where are we on the list? Can we move up on the list to get an authorization of money for our facilities that we need? I'm one of the lucky ones that got to go to Calexico High when it was only about 5 years old. That was a long time ago. So yes, it needs to be repaired, rebuilt, imploded, and start over again. When I listen to the videos at home, I listen to things that aren't on the agenda, that are not posted on the minutes. And one of the items was when you listen to the unaudited actuals, and Ms. Randall was presenting, and she said that to make sure that we spent all our monies in categorical, she went over the budget by $5 million. That was worrisome to me because nobody said anything here when you were given that information, like how did we go over by $5 million? And one of the programs that she listed a aggregate group of funds that went over, and it totaled out to $5 million. It's on the video. And one of them was migrant. And you know how I feel about migrant money and how I came and asked for some money for a field trip, and I wanted $200. Well, I'm going to come back again because we can go over the budget by $5 million, and you can certainly put $200 on a field trip for a group of migrant students. I'm going to leave you with these minutes, and I'm going to caution you not to approve anything that has a balloon payment at the end. And just don't make any decisions tonight. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harvey.
Probably
No. Thank you, Ms. Harvey. Okay. No more items for comments from the public. Going once, going twice. All right. Item H, bond and facility services presentations to the Board of Trustees. H1, CFW. Who's going to go in? I guess Mai.
Good evening, trustees. This evening, I've set up a series of presentations at your request where we have these 4 companies that are going to present some information regarding the types of services that their firms will perform in the areas of bond and facilities for school districts. The firms are CFW, ISOM Advisors, Mission Trail Advisors, Dale Scott and Company Incorporated. They're in no particular order, but I do know that CFW is listed as H1. They're had a flight delay, so they're going to go last. So I'm going to get them out the hallway, and we're going to start with ISOM Advisors. So I'll ask them to step in.
Thank you, Ms. Randall.
They're not here. What's that? Oh, they're not here. Give me. Ready? Are you ready? Good evening, and first thing, thank you for inviting us here today. On a personal basis, it's always fun to come down here to Calexico. I've been working with the city now for 37 years. I'm the founder of Urban Futures, which is the parent company of ISOM Advisors. And Jason Liss is with me here to my left. He's the handsome one, the young guy that will be giving the balance of the presentation tonight. Let me give you a little bit of background about who we are and what we are and why we think that we're the proper firm for you as a school board to actually engage to assist you in your financing. ISOM Advisors is a full-service planning, campaign, and financial advisory firm that serves the dominant share of the state of California and is the #1 firm in the state of California as far as number of transactions that we have completed over the last years. Other firms very well say that they are #1, but if you check the state records about the transactions actually completed, we are the #1 firm in the state of California. Urban Futures, which is the parent company of ISOM Advisors, I'm the founder of that firm, has been in business now for 43 years and is a dominant firm within the state of California. So it's one of the only firms in the state of California that sort of has married the city practice with a school practice. Jason Liss, the handsome devil here to my left, is the director of our Southern California operations, and both Jason and I are located in Orange, California, which is within a very, very reasonable drive of the city of Calexico. Before Jason begins, let me just give you kind of a couple editorial comments about us and who we are. As I said before, we've been within Imperial County for 37 years, and we've worked for a dominant share of school districts within the county and represented every city. We're the only firm that's in the competition this evening, I think, that can really understands what goes on here in Calexico. We've been through the good, the bad, and the ugly over all these years, and Calexico, as you know, is a very fine city, but it's had its problems, and the school district over the period of years has had some problems too, and we're extremely aware of those and think that we can also help out. Calexico holds a special place in my heart. I made a promise to the board, or actually city council at that time, that hired me back in 1977, 78, that I would dedicate a good portion of my life to try to improve this city. And I think it's very important for the city and the school board to work together, because without quality education and quality physical plants, you can't have a quality city. And that's been the mantra that I've carried over the last decades to the city council. And I think that if you do choose to move ahead with a bond election, I think that our contacts here in the city, we've been a member of the Chamber of Commerce for 15 years, and we would certainly go out and assist you as a board to achieve your goal to get enough individuals to vote for a school bond. And I think that we have a tremendous amount of credibility within this county and within the city to accomplish that particular goal. Urban Futures, ISM Advisors, we've also assisted the school in the adoption of all of your tax allocation pass-through arrangements over the last 5 to 7 years. Right now, we're very much engaged in working with the State Department of Finance and helping to try to get free the money that's due to you through the RDA for your school project, for your pool project, and that's been somewhat of a battle, but we think that we will get that solved fairly quickly. We want to be your financial advisor because I think that we can pretty much guarantee you, in fact, without a doubt, can guarantee you a genuine commitment to helping you adopt your goals and policies and helping you adopt a new bond issue. We're dedicated to the city, we're involved in the city, and we want to be part of your team. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Lish. He's going to go through some of the technical aspects of the presentation this evening, and where necessary, I'll add in a little bit of local color. Jason?
Good evening. I'm going to start on page 5 of the presentation. And I know you're going to hear 3 other presentations tonight, so I'm going to try to keep it as lively as possible. And as I go through this, if you have any questions along the way, I want to reserve them to the end. That's perfectly fine. But just to extend on the company overview on page 5, as Marshall stated, we are the leading financial advisor in the state of California when it comes in terms to the amount of bonds sold for school districts. This doesn't include trans, it doesn't include COPs. This is general obligation bonds that if you went through a bond election process, that's what you as a board would issue. We have a lot of experience in the county, and I work with more school districts in the county than anybody else you're going to speak with tonight. Both Brawleys, El Centro, Heber. I'm actually running a campaign right now for Heber for their community gym project, and Holtville Unified School District. So again, I'm down here often. I know the area very well. And again, I work with these school districts on general obligation bonds, not trans. I work with these people on a day-to-day basis, get very involved with these school districts. So feel free, more than free, to contact any of these school district superintendents, and I'm sure they would say very nice things about us. On page 6, let's go briefly over page 6. We are a full-service firm, which means we can help from the very beginning of anything that the school district is considering, which is likely a voter ID survey to test the acceptance levels, if a bond is even going to fly in the first place or not. We run the campaign through a campaign committee that would be created. It would be made up of a handful of community residents. And we run the full marketing aspect, just like I'm doing in Heber now. And that's various documents. That's FAQ pieces, that's different mail pieces, that's door-to-door walking, that's phone banking, and our campaigns are run on a bilingual basis. I know you have a mainly Spanish-speaking community or large Spanish-speaking community, and we can certainly execute and help reach that demographic. And then last but not least, our pure financial advisory work, that is helping the school district and the school district board get the best overall competitive deal, competitive package when you actually go to sell your bonds, which is a very important part of the process. And I'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the course of the conversation. On page 7, I'm not going to go through all the numbers. You're going to be inundated with numbers tonight, right? What this table represents is our experience with working with school districts. We're in the market selling school bonds for districts at least twice a week. And again, this table represents school GO bonds, general obligation bonds. We're not lumping trans in with it. And the reason that this is important, not that we do a lot of financings, because that's not what you're concerned about. Why this is important to you is when we sell your bonds, we're so in tune with the market that when we're working with the underwriters or buyers of your bonds, we know their cash positions or liquidity positions. And what I mean by that, a very real world example, I worked on a bond sale for Encinitas School District in San Diego County. And we got very good demand during the bond sale. And the demand was so great that the underwriters willingly lowered their interest rates, which lowered the cost savings to taxpayers. I felt and I knew based on that particular market that we could push it a little further and continue to lower rates. And that 10-minute phone conversation during the actual sale of the bonds saved that school district's taxpayers another $75,000. And without that 10-minute conversation, without that knowledge of the market, that wouldn't have happened. And that 10-minute conversation, alone paid for the fee that our company charges. 2012, I'll go over this very briefly. We passed, at the time, a state record for amount of past bond elections in a year at 37, which was great. And this was school districts that were very conservative, very liberal, up and down the scope. And the reason that we were so successful in 2012, and on page 8 and page 9, 2014, where we passed another 42 elections, is that we craft a campaign that meets your school district. You're not going to be the same as a school district in San Diego County necessarily, or LA County, or Siskiyou County, or anywhere in the Bay Area. You have very unique circumstances and demographics, just like every community does. And we're going to make sure that we communicate with your public the way that they want to be communicated to. We're going to craft a plan that's going to be the most appealing and most appetizing so that voters will end up saying yes for your bond measure. So again, I think experience, especially recent experience, does matter. I always kind of say you're as good as your last game, so to speak. In 2014, we were very, very successful. Page 10, for better lack of words, it's kind of our brag page. This is our 2014 election approval success versus our competitors. And we were, 30 school districts helped and pass their measures than our nearest competitor. So again, another way of showing, another way of highlighting that we take a very real and serious process, and we do a very good job at passing bond elections. Starting on page 12, I'm going to slow down just a little bit because I think it's important to really focus on who you are, what your school district could accomplish through a bond measure. Everyone you're going to speak with tonight is going to have similar pages. So again, I want to tell you some things about yourselves and how it relates to bonds that you might not hear anyplace else tonight. So over the last 12 years, your tax base has grown by an average of 5.74%. Last year, nearly 13%. And that 13% is largely due to the projects that Marshall's side of the business handled with the shopping center. And we expect another large hike for fiscal year 16-17 in the tune of about another 100 million, which is great because as your tax base grows, it gives you the ability to access more funds. Your current tax rate right now is $59.70, and the pace, depending on how your tax base grows in the future, or doesn't grow, that tax rate is going to lower. If you grow by a large amount, it's going to go higher if you don't grow, or if you shrink. The reason that this page is important is that it helps you figure out your credit card limit, so to speak. How much can you borrow through bond funds? And the test is your current tax year's total tax base. And that's what assessed valuation means. It's all taxable property within your district borders. Doesn't include churches or other exempt organizations. But as a unified district, the math is pretty straightforward. It's 2.5% times your current year taxable value, which makes your gross bonding capacity $48.5 million. You then subtract out any principal amount of general obligation bonds you have outstanding, which today is approximately $25.9 million. As the years go on, that debt will get paid off and your capacity will increase. So right now your net value is $22.6 million, but as your tax base grows, which we expect it to grow next year, that's going to get higher. So that's test one of the amount of bonds that you can access. Test two is on page 13. This table shows varying tax rates, what you could get based on this draw schedule, which I don't know your construction schedule or what your draw schedule would be. But assuming a bond sale every 2 to 3 years, and assuming tax-based growth, and when I talk about tax-based growth, the reason that is important, as you project out the higher rate your tax base is going to grow, the more bonds you can access. The lower your projected values we project out, the less some bond proceeds. And the trick is to be conservative enough. You don't want to assume that you're going to grow by 10% year over year and sell bonds against that. Because if you do something like that, your tax rate is going to be much higher than what you told your taxpayers. So you want to be conservative enough and feel confident in how your tax base may grow in the future, because as you sell bonds against that, if you promise your taxpayers for this authorization not to exceed $60 per $100,000 of assessed value, which is a unified district's legal limit, and if you don't meet your projections, the county auditor will be obligated to collect and pay bondholders no matter how your tax base grew, which at the end of the day, instead of a $60 tax rate, could turn into 65, could turn into 70, so on and so on. And that's not illegal, but politically speaking, not a good thing. If you tell your community $60 and ends up being something higher, not good for the board, not good for the administration. So again, you just want to be conservative enough with your projections. But based on these projections and assuming a 25-year bond sale for each of your bonds, you can generate $21 million at the $45 tax rate and $28 million at the $60 tax rate. And again, I said right now your legal limit is 22 point something million, but as time goes on, you are going to grow, bonds are going to fall off, so you would be able to access additional funds. And for some reason, if you don't grow at the level that we think you're going to grow, you might just have to wait between your next bond sale. You also might see tonight, or have seen in the past, your ability to reach more than $28 million. And I would say that's absolutely true. You could get more than $28 million if you assume higher growth rates and if you assume a longer bond program. I set up this preliminary bond program like this because I think with your community, you're going to want to show your community results right away. You're going to want to spend money to modernize your facilities, construct new facilities, and show that immediate investment into the community. I'm working with a school district right now in San Diego County, San Ysidro. If you know anything about San Ysidro School District, they've had some real issues in the past. And I wasn't the advisor that got them into that situation. I'm in there now cleaning a lot of things up. And their previous advisor recommended a program that will never be obtained. They said they could access a lot more bond proceeds than they really can. They're stuck with about $100 million of authorization that they're never going to be able to access. So they're going to have to go out and ask voters for another ask to finish their projects. And again, not illegal, not bad from a like legal standpoint, but from a political standpoint, not a good thing. Another way of saying you don't want to tell your community you're going to do $50 million on projects, but can never actually get that. Give them a package, give them your community something that they can stand behind, that they can believe in, that you can actually accomplish. Along with this, this $28 million, as you're probably aware, that the state of California is going to have a school bond on the November 16 ballot. And the way that this state program works is that you're eligible for up to 50% of new construction match and 60-40 of renovation match. Our firm, we don't work with the state to get that funding, but we work with other firms to help get you that matching funds. And I know enough about it to give the district some advice, but I would recommend an expert on a standalone basis who deals with the state daily, and this is all they do, to help get you as much of those state funds as you can, because there's a lot of timing issues that would help maximize your state eligibility. But for you to sell a $28 million bond and get another $28 million in state matching funds is very likely, as long as the state bond passes. And we haven't had a state bond since 2016, or since 2006. 10 years later, I think it's time, and I think it does get through this time around. On page 15, the voter demographics, what I noticed right away is that your voter demographics are very ripe for a bond measure. These are all things that we like to see in what I do. You have nearly 15,000 registered voters. Majority are Democrats, 58%. And Democrats throughout the history of this county, throughout the state, throughout the world, vote for school bonds more so than Republican counterparts. 9% identified as Republican, 33% as other. And other generally means decline to state. They're not Green Party or Libertarian, although they may be. It usually follows the dominant sect of that particular party. So you're mainly Democrat, which for a bond election is great. And you're also a younger population, which is important when you're trying to pass a bond. Because that generally means is that you have parents with students that are within your school system. And as there is that tie, the more the likelihood those parents would want to invest their property tax dollars to help improve the schools for their students. On page 16 is your district specific voter turnout. And you had a low June 2012 at 17%. And a high in November, the last presidential election year, of 51%. Part of what I envisioned for your district is, when working with our firm, is to have people dedicated to getting people registered to vote. You have relatively low voter turnout compared to your registered voters. So what we've been able to do at Heber is to get a lot of people who weren't registered, get them registered, and a lot of people who are registered to vote, who have never voted before, to get out and vote. And we would have people solely dedicated to those endeavors, which I think will help push up your yes votes for your particular measure. And without doing that additional work, we expect a 20% voter turnout in June and 50% in November. And the question I generally get, well, when is the right time to go? And the right time to go is when you're ready. If your community is ready, if you have all your plans lined up, you can go in June. If you're not ready, you have the backdrop of November to give yourself more time. Page 18 is a June timeline. Page 19 is a November timeline. And I'm going to go over this very briefly. Just talk about some of the key dates, and I'll discuss the things in bold. So November, December, whenever you decide to hire your consultants to come back and do more of a thorough presentation about what all this could mean for your district. Conduct a survey sometime in February. It could be January, it could be March next year. You have some time built into this schedule. And then sometime in June, call a meeting to pass your election resolution and all supporting documents. And about 3 months out from whatever election date you decide to run, if you do decide to run, start the campaign process, the pure campaigning, the phone banking, the mail pieces, the door-to-door activities. Again, which our firm, we work with a campaign committee, group of individuals that you as a board and you as a district staff will help decide who those campaign committee people should be. Just the last couple of slides. So why work with us compared to, or instead of the others that you're going to speak with tonight? And on page 21, I think we lay out some very good reasons why. Throughout the state, we are seen as a very trustworthy, reliable firm that works well with school districts, is a partner with a school district. We have never been sued by a school district. We've never sued a school district. That's just bad business. Unfortunately, that has happened in our industry. None of our financings, I always say with school financings, sometimes people like to say, oh, we're the most creative firm. With public money, school district money, I think you should be as plain vanilla, as straightforward, as boring as possible. You want something that's very simple, very easy to digest, that your community can support and understand. These wild financings with long-term CAB programs and the very other mechanisms that are out there, I think are not wise for the great majority of school districts. So the plan that I would put for you is very straightforward, very reasonable, and something that I could stand behind and you could stand behind for a very long time. Headline risk. Nothing seeks a campaign faster than bad news. And with your school district, I think you want to keep the communication, you want to keep the messaging, the teams that you work with, the people that you select, keep it as clean and straightforward as possible. These are all actual headlines from other firms in the state. Google us, Yahoo search, whatever you do to find your news. You're not going to find one headline like this with our firm associated to it. We have a very good reputation of doing good, honest work for our school district clients. And again, the last thing that you need during the campaign is bad news on the front page, and you're not going to get that with us. Last page, rationale for selection. As I stated before, we are the number one FA firm in the state when it comes to general obligation bond sales and to passing bond elections. And I always say you're only as good as your last game. Sometimes I see figures from some of my competitors that say we've done X amount of school financing since 2000, and that's great. But a lot of changes can happen over a 15, 16-year period. Our last two election cycles, we by far worked with more school districts and helped more school districts pass bonds than anyone else. What you see is what you get. We are. If you decide to work with us, you're going to see me and you're going to see Marshall. Marshall's been doing work in this county for 37 years. I've been in the industry for 14 years, so not as much experience, but enough experience to be very well versed in what I do on a day-to-day basis. And we are truly independent. One of the previous slides that I had showed that we work with a variety of underwriters. We work with a variety of bond attorneys. And if you decide to move forward, you would have an underwriter and you would have a bond attorney. And we don't team up with any particular groups. We help you, if need be, find the professionals that are right for your district. Because this process is it's additional work, but it's a fun process. And if you're going to be spending additional time, additional work, it should be with people that you trust and that you like. And again, I think tying all the right people together to help your community pass a bond and to implement the bond program, I think it's important to have the right people. And with our experience in the county and with our experience particularly to this city, I think we're the right firm for you. And that's it for me. Any questions?
When was the last time you worked with somebody in the county?
Last time I worked with somebody in the county was a refunding for El Centro. I think we closed that financing, it was May of this year. And I'm working with Heber right now on their bond campaign. I'm working with Holtville on a COP financing for a culinary arts project right now. Brawley, I think I did a refunding for them last 2014, both high school and elementary district. So that's the most recent experience in that order.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming. Hay una sodita. Janet, ¿no quedaron sodas? Sodas. Allá. Sí.
Good evening, trustees, again. Now I'm going to present to you Mr. Lalo Trujillo from Mission Trail Advisors.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. Yeah.
Just click there and then you can move it. Go back.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Appreciate it. Should I go forward?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for hosting me for this presentation. Let me start by thanking you for what you do. I think your devotion to education at school districts like this is important. I'm a product of a place like this. I grew up in Salinas. I'm a product of an agricultural community, and it is because of the efforts that people were interested in making sure we got an education that gave us opportunities that I was able to go from there and seek opportunities. I went to the University of California at Berkeley, got my undergraduate degree there, and then I went on to the MBA program at UCLA. And from there, I traveled through the industry in public finance, and I now have my own firm. And I'd like to present to you what my firm can do for this district. So let me start by prefacing my presentation by saying that what my firm does is very different from what you're going to see from the other firms. We do not do anything other than financial advisory services. We don't do anything with the elections. We don't get into a contract where we're going to win your election and then get the financial advisory agreement from you. It's a different model. It's a model that's being used by a lot of school districts. And the reason school districts do that is because there's a lot of inherent conflicts of interest when you have the whole package done by one single firm. I just gave a presentation on that topic with other firms at the gathering that we had with the CLSBA in Del Mar. I don't know if any of you folks managed to attend that last couple of weeks. But really, the model is very different. The model is everybody does a different role. So the voter survey is done by a company that specializes in that. The campaign consultant is a campaign consultancy firm, and the financial advisory is a financial advisory firm. If you keep everybody separate, you have no conflicts of interest, and you can see some inherent conflicts of interest. A voter survey could be influenced by the desire to get the campaign consultant work, and the campaign work itself and the financial advisory don't really seem to go hand in hand. So again, a lot of school districts are doing that. 3 of the school districts that I'm working with absolutely go by that model, will not consider anything else. It's a 4th one that I'm going to be interviewing in a couple of weeks, and that's the model they want to pursue, and it keeps everything on even keel. With that, let me walk you through my presentation. First, I wanted to show you where you are with your existing debt, the 2004 Measure J. By the way, congratulations on that one in terms of community support. That was a Prop 39 election, which only required a 55% voter approval, but the district got overwhelming support in excess of 75%. That's a very, very high support rate, so congratulations. From that bond measure, Measure J, it's all been sold. So you issued 2 series really. One was a refinancing. The 2004 series, which was $13,999,000, call it $14 million. Of that, 2.9 million is still outstanding. The remainder was paid off or refinanced with the 2007 refunding you see there at the bottom. You also issued a series in 2005. That was $16 million, which is the remainder of that authorization. $14.5 million remains. So currently you have outstanding $26.18 million, and your estimated total measured J tax rate per $100,000 of assessed value is about $82.45. Tax bills are actually showing a little bit of a different number from that, but that's what the estimate is. I spoke with the county, and they didn't get back to me to give me the exact figure, but that's what the estimate shows it should be on the basis of outstanding debt. Why is that important? Because we're talking about a new bond measure, and I'm going to show you a little later how the new bond measure would affect your total tax rates. Any bond measure that you consider is going to be based on two main factors, and there's nothing that any consultant can do about that. They are what they are, and that is going to be the growth in your assessed valuation, as well as the interest rate environment when you issue those bonds. Assumptions are what go into a bond program as you move forward, and those are very important. I'm going to talk about that a little later, because assuming something that is very different from reality can make a whole lot of difference between expectations and then what happens to the actual program when you go down the road and you implement that program. So looking at your assessed valuation for the last 15 years, you have very robust growth, especially in the last couple of years. Your average is 5.5 during that period, which is very, very strong. You can see the pattern there. You see the blue bars. That's the growth. And then you see what a lot of school districts, pretty much all school districts in California, generally experienced after that, and that's the red bars. You started seeing declining, that's the crash. And what you're seeing, the last two bars, again, is what you're seeing in California. You're seeing a rebound. Now, the interesting thing about your rebound is that you can see the last bar. That is a very large increase. That's almost 13%. It's very tempting to then assume that you're going to have this tremendous growth going forward. And that's a lot of times a fallacy. And when you have bond programs that make these false assumptions, that's when you get in trouble. And you get what I'm going to call stranded programs, programs that consultants promised you could get this, but then you get stranded. And I'm working with school districts rescuing those stranded programs right now because of assumptions that they made back before we had that heyday. You see the last blue bars before the red? Look at those increases. And so people were making assumptions north of 8%, 9%. There was a school district I just was looking at the assumptions that were made for their 2008 bond issue, and they were assuming 9.6% growth for 30 years straight. Unbelievable. Out of a $220 million program, they were able to get $36 million, and now they're stranded. Those are consultants. Those are consultants that don't come forward and tell you the reality of what you should realistically expect, and then build programs on false expectations. There is a limitation that you need to be aware of for any bond program that you embark on, and that is there's a statutory bonding capacity that the district has to deal with. I understand that looking at your master plan, there's about $88.8 million in new construction costs that were recommended in that 2014-2015 facilities master plan, and the aggregate is $196.6 million, so let's call it $200 million. The district currently does not have the statutory capacity to accommodate that kind of program. That's very high in comparison to a statutory limit that the state places on school districts. And let me walk you through the example below. Your total assessed valuation for 2015-16 is $1.9 billion. As a unified school district, your statutory debt limit is 2.5% of that, which means your limit is $48.4 million. You have outstanding debt of $26 million, which means your headroom, what you can actually issue to be within that limit, is a little bit over $22 million. Now, what would happen if you implemented, for the sake of discussion, a $100 million program? So your target net statutory debt capacity would be $100 million, which means your total target debt limit would be $126 million. That percent, instead of the 2.5 statutory limitation, is 6.51%. It's more than twice as much. So is that doable? Maybe. The nice thing about that statutory limit is the Department of Education has a process where you can seek a waiver of that. And I recently got a waiver for one of my school district clients where we doubled it. They were actually an elementary school district. And so theirs was half of yours, 1.25%. We got it to twice as much, so 2.5%. And not really an issue. It was just a matter of going through the process and demonstrating the need. You folks have that need. You have a master facilities plan that shows that need, so you could make an argument out, and if you hired my firm, I would be the one making that argument for you, that you have that need. So as an example, if you were to go and actually seek doubling your capacity from 2.5 to 5%, which is, again, very feasible, you would be looking at a $97 million new limit. That's $72.8 million additional to what you have, and that would be very feasible. Again, north of that would be a matter of making a strong argument, which I think you do have. But I wanted you to be aware that that is part of the process that you would have to go through. You also have what I'm going to call tax rate bonding capacity. And that is, you're limited to, if you were to seek a Proposition 39, 55% threshold voter approval bond election, you're limited to $60 per $100,000 of assessed value. The district has a very modest tax base of $1.94 billion. So that is a very lofty goal to go looking for a $100 million bond program when you have assessed value of short of $2 billion. So if we look at reasonable assumptions on interest rates, which I used a 5% interest rate long-term, and then I used assessed value assumption growths of 2, 3, and 4%, and then leveling off at 4%. The district could get approximately $41 million within a 10-year time frame. And again, the time frame is important because you don't want to go for a number that is significantly higher than what you can get over 10 years, because realistically, it's very difficult to estimate where construction costs are going to be 10 years from now. And if you haven't really bonded for all your needs within 10 years, you probably would want to be looking at a new election in 10 years anyway, as much as you're doing now, because your last one was in 2004. So over a 10-year time frame, $41 million looks very feasible with a Prop 39 election. There is an alternative, and still within the Prop 39 constraints, to get more, and the alternative is to have twin elections. So you could have, and school districts have done this, you could have two bond measures go to the voters at the same time, each requiring 55% voter approval, and you would be getting double that. It doesn't mean that, of course, that you're going to be doing twice the taxes, but you're still at that 55% voter threshold. And so you would double that, you would get $82 million over the same time frame. A third alternative is you could consider what's called a Proposition 46 2/3 voter approval election. So that's a little higher than the 55% voter approval, but it's certainly lower than the last approval rate of 75%. So it may be very attainable, and that would show the possibility of that being successful. That would show in the voter survey that would be done for the district. In that case, the bonding capacity could go well beyond $82 million because the tax rate would not be a constraint. It would be a matter of board policy. Whatever the board decides to set the tax rates at, that would really be the constraint that your consultant would be dealing with in constructing that bond program. And the only caveat to that is that unlike a Prop 39 election, this is what we call brick and mortar only. You cannot use it for furniture and fixtures or equipment, for example. So it's just hard construction or the infrastructure that goes into the hard construction for computer systems. Let's look at what this looks like graphically. So here's your existing debt. Okay, it matures 2034, and you see how it peaks up? This is, the reason this peaks up is because I'm looking at assumed growth of 2%, 3%, and 4% for assessed value. The program was not built on that. The program was built on significantly higher growth. And in order for those tax rates to be level, you would have to be attaining a lot greater growth than that. So what I call reasonable growth means that you are going to be looking at those tax rates unless you have tremendous growth in the future. This is important. Going back to this, let me point something out to you. That see those last two bars? That last one is a big jump, but the first blue one is also pretty high, 5.7, whereas the years before it was negative. There is a legal process by which, and you may be very familiar with, by which homeowners can bring down their assessed value. It's called Proposition 8. Under Proposition 8, if the assessed value drops below where the county assessor has you, if the market value drops before where the county assessor has you, you can go and request that they bring it down. Okay, and all counties have done that during this real estate recession. A lot of home values went down because people applied under Proposition 8. The flip side is Proposition 8 is not limited to the 2% assessed value growth each year. The Proposition 13 limits you to. The result of that is what we call Proposition 8 springback, and that is that when a home, when the home values are increasing, the assessor does not have to limit the increase in the home value that is being assessed to 2%. In fact, they can do whatever they think that they can justify based on market conditions. For you folks, 13,000 of the parcels in the county's 29,000 parcels, 13,000, that's 45% of the parcels are subject to Proposition 8 springback this year. That's why you see that big 12 north of 12% springback. So as soon as that process takes care of itself and the values are back to where the county assessor now is limited to only 2% growth, you're not going to see these kinds of jumps. These are really misleading in terms of what should be expected going forward. That's the reason that we hone in on long-term reasonable projections that settle in on 4%. So again, back to this one. This is your existing debt, and the Measure J tax rate is projected to hit $170 in 2033. So it's basically going to go up from where it is right now every year, unless, again, we hit rates that are greater than 4%. So if you were to do a Prop 39 $60 election, you would basically be layering $60 on top of that blue, and that's your red. That's what it would look like. Same peak. Your maximum estimated combined rate is $230 in 2033. Then it levels off after that. If you were to do twin elections, it's twice that. It's the red. Your maximum estimated tax rate is $290, again in the same year, 2033. It's that peak. So this is, again, the reality. Unless over the long haul, you're going to get growth significantly north of 4%. This is what the bond sizings would look like. And this is an example. What would happen is basically if our firm were working for you, would be working with your construction folks, your program managers, and we would be looking at the actual spend down needs on the basis of whatever construction schedule they comprise, and that would dictate when the bonds get issued. But this is an example of basically a 10-year time frame to get the $41 or $82 million issued in either a single bond election or the twin measures. That's what that would look like. If you do a 2/3 election, then your maximum tax rate, as an example, if you honed in on 100, it's as an example, if you hone in on $150 maximum tax rate, you're looking at total estimated tax rate of $320 and 38 cents, again in the same year, 2033. And this is what the bond sizings would look like. You would be able, in that time frame that we spoke about, if you do a 2/3, to get $102 million issued by 2026. So our value proposition, and my presentation is rather short because I said we don't do bond elections, we don't do the other ancillary services that the other firms are promising. We do one thing and we do it well, and that's financial advisory. That's all we do for the districts that we work with. We're completely independent. We only have one single line of business. We're client focused, we're not volume focused. So we only take on clients that we think we can service and service them well. All work is performed at the senior level by industry veterans with strong industry ties. My partner and I each have 25 years plus experience in the industry. We do all the work. We don't hand it off to junior analysts. There's been some mistakes out there in the industry caused by evidently work being done by junior analysts, and the districts were harmed. With us, you're looking at the main person that would be looking to do the work for you. So you're talking to the guy that would be actually doing every number crunching exercise for you. We also have senior level underwriting experience. Why is that important? Because financial advisors are going to be advising you on bond sales. In addition to doing all the work leading up to the bond election, the main role of the financial advisor is, once the program is in place, advising you on the sale of those bonds. Well, if you don't have experience on that side, how can you be advising anybody? And both of us have many, many years working on that side. I actually ran the West Coast office for a large national firm out of Los Angeles. I was there for several years, and then subsequent to that, I worked for another underwriter. San Francisco, total underwriting experience at the senior level of 8 years. My partner, 6 years on the underwriting side. Both of us also have credit experience. He was a credit analyst for one of the major rating agencies. Again, part of the big process in selling a bond issue is crafting the rating presentation and getting the highest ratings. So we have rating level experience as well. We have no history of capital appreciation bonds followed by cab recovery plans, and a lot of firms do. They got districts in trouble issuing cabs, and they later on went and proposed solutions on how to do those recoveries. We don't have any such history. We don't have any history of any stranded debt programs, as I mentioned before. We don't go out there and propose an unattainable number and then make up excuses as to why you can't get to that and leave you stranded. And that's very harmful for school districts, because you plan on getting what you went to the voters to get approval for, and then get stuck in your program, the construction program gets stuck halfway. And lastly, I have strong familiarity with and affinity for the Calexico community. I've had family that lived here. I still have family that lives across the border in Mexicali. I'm very familiar with Calexico, and as I told you, I grew up in a similar community. I know the factors that are important to our communities, and I would put my best foot forward to make sure that you get the best service from that firm if you should retain us. That's it. If you have any questions.
Trustees, do you have any questions? I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. We're gonna go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Thank you. It's now 6:30 exactly, so Ms. Randall?
Good evening, trustees. At this time, I'm going to present Mr. Mark Farrell, and he's from Dale Scott and Company Incorporated.
Thank you. Good evening. All right, so jump right in. So Dale Scott and Company is a full-service financial advisory firm. I'm based out of our Los Angeles office. We also have an office in San Francisco. And what we're seeing here on this chart on the left, in 2014, we brought 117 financings, tax-exempt financings to the market, more than any other financial advisor in the state. And this includes tax revenue anticipation notes and general obligation bonds. And I know some like to question why we include trans in a presentation on geo bonds, but I think I would say two things. One, and I was actually just talking to Maya about it, the need for trans and cash flow is paramount. You run out of cash and can't make your payroll. The last thing you're worried about is issuing geo bonds, and so it's a very critical financing tool for districts. Plus, it gives us a lot of insight and expertise into school district budgets. And despite the fact that general obligation bonds are backed by property taxes, when you're actually sitting in front of the rating agencies, a big portion of the discussion has to do with the budget and the school's finances. So being able to assist districts in that rating process, we have found by doing the trans really helps us and helps our clients. And then on the right, a number of quotes from our clients. And I would encourage the district not just to read the quotes, but actually pick up the phone and call any of these districts, or happy to provide additional references as well. We have a lot of experience working on large and complex bond measures, and while some of these may be larger than the bond measure that Calexico Unified is considering, some of the challenges we see in these districts we might also see here. So this will actually be the second bond measure that the district is going out for. So we have a number of districts where we work with multiple elections, where you have multiple tax rates layering on top of each other. We also, looking at our experience on the left, we have a tremendous amount of capital markets experience. I spent 12 years at Piper Jaffray, an investment bank, prior to joining Dale Scott and Company. Our founder, Dale Scott, also worked for 10 plus years on Wall Street. We understand how the municipal bond industry works. We understand how bonds are sold. And we can help districts navigate through that process. And we have the expertise to, one, not only allow districts to issue bonds via competitive sale, which I'll talk about a little bit in a moment, but also if you do a negotiated bond sale, we know what's going on in the market. We've invested a tremendous amount into different information systems and technologies so that we have access to the same information that the investment banks have when they're discussing and setting interest rates for the school district's bonds. Talked about a little bit a competitive sale, and one of the things we really pride ourselves on is being an independent financial advisor. We don't have any co-marketing deals with investment banks, any handshake deals with investment banks, and a lot of this is demonstrated by the amount of competitive bond sales we do. So on the right you can see for new geo bonds for school districts from 2013 to 2014, a little over half of the financings that we've done we sold via competitive sale versus the industry average. Almost 90% of our competitors use negotiated bond sale. When you do a negotiated bond sale, you're hiring an investment bank up front and allowing that one investment bank to go out and sell your bonds to the investment community. On a competitive sale, we would actually structure your financing and put that out to bid and let every investment bank bid on that, and whoever provides the lowest interest rate gets awarded the bonds. So there's a couple advantages there. One is political. You can't be accused of setting up some sweetheart deal for one investment bank to market your bonds. So when you're actually going out for the election, you can eliminate that as a potential campaign issue that your opponents could use. And then two, if you look at the chart on the lower left, we believe in general that competitive bond sale gives the best results for school districts and brings the lowest interest cost. So a much larger transaction than we would see here in Calexico, but recently did a financing for Eastside High School District up in San Jose. It's a $100 million geo bond we brought competitively. The winning bid was Bank of America at 3.47%, and you can see the remaining bids from 5 other banks, all very well-known and strong banks. But even the next lowest bid from Barclays Bank, just a 0.018% interest rate difference, would have resulted in almost $300,000 more of cost to the district's taxpayers. And if you take that all the way down to the highest interest rate bid, that would have resulted in $2.7 million of additional cost to taxpayers. And so what we see is you don't necessarily know what bank on any given day is going to be able to provide you with the best interest rates. So when possible, we try to issue our new money GEO bonds via competitive sale. I think another thing that differentiates our firm is our history of innovation. We actually hold 2 different patents for our financing tools. We've set up a program called GEO reauthorization bonds that allows districts that can't access their Prop 39 bonds because they've reached their tax rates. We've set up a program to allow districts to go back to voters and reauthorize those bonds. And I think what may be potentially applicable here is our CAB restructuring program. So we've been told for years that school districts that issue non-callable capital appreciation bonds can do nothing but wait for those CABs to mature and pay those off over 10, 20, 30, even 40 years in some cases. So this year we actually developed a program where we can go out and refinance non-callable capital appreciation bonds. So in the district's Measure J bond program, about $19 million of your $30 million in bonds were issued as non-callable capital appreciation bonds. So we've done this for 6 districts already this year, and we've saved taxpayers over $189 million in those 6 different refundings. So something we could take a look at as part of your overall program, going out and refinancing those non-callable caps. Put together a list of the recent bond elections we've done in the area. We have not done any GEO bonds here in Imperial County, but we've done quite a few in neighboring San Diego County. So you can see the list, about $600 million in approved bond authorizations from, kind of working your way working your way west. You can see districts like Cajon Valley, Lemon Grove, National School District, South Bay. We actually helped National School District pass their first ever GEO bond in 2014, and they received a 78.6% approval rate. What I have done a lot in Imperial County is work with districts on trans. So I manage the CSBA's cash reserve program. I've done that since 2005 and worked on the program since 2002. So I've worked with 11 different districts here, including the county office, and Calexico Unified on the last tran that it issued through that program back in 2011. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the district and the tax base. I'll probably move through this fairly quickly because as the third presenter, I'm sure you've been inundated with all the charts about your assessed value and growth. But the district has about $1.9 billion of assessed value. And obviously that's critical for a GEO bond, as that's the tax base that's going to pay back the bond. And you had some declines in assessed value during the recession, not as bad as we've seen in many areas, especially many growth areas like the Imperial Valley, and kind of a return to strong growth. Over the past 10 years, that kind of annualized growth rate, 3.85%. And when we start to think about bonding capacity for the district, there's 2 different measures of bonding capacity. The first is a legal limit, the statutory debt limit. There's an education code statute for unified school districts that limits the amount of outstanding bonds you can have to 2.5% of your total assessed value. So that 2.5% of 1.9 million gives you a gross capacity of 48.4 million. You have to subtract out the outstanding GEO bonds from your prior bond authorization, so 26.5 million, leaving you today, if you had a bond authorization available, you could issue $21.9 million under this one provision, this one debt limit capacity factor. And that capacity will grow over time. So the blue bars represent the outstanding principal amount from your prior bond, and the red line represents the gross capacity as assessed value increases. And in this chart, we're assuming assessed value grows at 3% annually. So if we fast forward to 2017, which if you passed a bond measure in 2016 would probably be the timing that you'd issue that first series of bonds, you'd have about 24.2 million of net capacity. Moving forward to 2020, about 31.6 million, and grows from there. And if we look at the second bonding capacity question, then this is the Prop 39 tax rate limit. So under Proposition 39, each election gives you a new $60 tax rate limit. So the red bar shows, the red line, excuse me, shows the maximum debt service you could support at a $60 per $100,000 tax rate. The colored bars below show the potential debt service for, in this case, 3 series of GEO bonds. The first being Series A that we assume was issued in the 2018 fiscal year, then 2020 and 2022, roughly about $10 million in each series. So an overall bond program about $31 million. And so any actual bond program would really start with sitting down with the district, figuring out what the needs are, what types of projects the district needs to complete, the timing for those projects, and laying out a bond issuance schedule that matches up to the construction cash flow schedule, potential money coming in from the state, if the state passes a bond, if there's a statewide school bond passed in 2016, and lining up that cash flow so that the bonds are issued at the appropriate time. We're also basing this on no capital appreciation bonds. So taking a more modest 3% assessed value growth rate and having the bond issuances kind of drop on the tail end. You can see we don't use that full $60 capacity on the long end. That allows us to only use the lower cost current interest bonds. So going back to 2010, we've worked on 68 GEO bond issuances for 35 different school districts in that $10 to $30 million range. So this is kind of a sweet spot, if you will, for us in terms of a very large number of our clients issue bonds in that $10 to $30 million range. So some districts that we've seen on prior slides: National, South Bay, Cajon Valley, Chula Vista, but also districts across the state: Fresno Unified, Soledad, to name a few. So we turn our attention on page page 13, the voter demographics of the district. And there's a couple things I'd like to highlight. So one, a very high Democratic registration. And I think the tendency is to assume, because of very high Democratic registration, bonds are going to pass very easily. But that really doesn't seem to be the case here in Imperial County. Your pass rate since 2002 is only about 70% on Prop 39 bonds. Statewide, that average is more about 80%. So putting a bond on the ballot in Imperial County does not guarantee success. Couple areas where we've seen a district with similar demographics. So up in southern Monterey County, 2 districts: Soledad, that we worked with in 2012, and Gonzales, that one of our competitors worked with in 2014. Pretty similar demographics to here in Calexico. And we worked with Soledad to create a very custom bond campaign that really looked at the local politics. And actually, we engaged the mayor of Soledad to serve as the campaign chairperson. Soledad was able to get passed at a 74.5% threshold. Gonzales in 2014, again, similar demographics. We have looked at it and we think a very kind of cookie cutter approach was taken to that bond program or that bond campaign, and they only received a 49.5% result. So I think for us, the innovation that we bring to financing tools, we also bring to the campaign side. We don't sit back, try to do the same thing in every district. We look at specifically what would work for each district that we work with. Voter turnout will also be a big factor here. You can see typically you're anywhere from 2 to 3 times the number of voters in the presidential election versus the primary in June. So as we look at possible election in 2016, care needs to be taken in looking at that election date and making sure when you're surveying voters and talking to voters that you're confident are they actually going to vote and in what particular election. And then wrapping up a little bit of an election timeline, but more to talk about the services that we provide. So on the pre-election front, we will work with the district very closely to figure out the needs and lay out a bond program that will match your construction needs and your timeline. We prepare a survey document. We can actually conduct the voter opinion survey based on the specific projects that the district might need, different tax rates, different dollar amounts. Come back, present that information to the board, work with the district on creating the actual ballot language and getting that all filed. We also work with our districts to help on the information campaign up front. I think a very big part of your campaign will be engaging your voters, engaging your parents, excuse me. You have a very high percentage of young voters in this district, much higher than the state average. About almost a third of your voters are under the age of 35, about half under the age of 45. These are your parents. So spending time and money to engage your parents, I think, will be a very critical strategy towards a successful measure here in Calexico. And with that, Audrey.
Trustees, do you have any questions? Mr. Calderon? No? Mr. Ortega? Ms. Real, how you doing? And let the record show that Ms. Trustee Real arrived here at 6:46. Thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it. Meeting over. Tra. Mr. Let's see. Sale. Huh?
I'm just going to introduce you, and you guys can go ahead and get started. Are we on a break, or are we? Oh, okay, already. Ortega? Oh, okay. Okay. A good evening again, trustees. I'm going to now present CFW, which is Caldwell, Flores and Winters, and I have Mr. Greg Norman and Mr. Miguel Rodriguez.
Good evening, buenas noches, Miguel Rodriguez, and again here with me, my colleague, Greg Norman from Caldwell Flores Winters. I want to say it's un placer, it's really a pleasure to be here today in this capacity. I think that a big memory from Calexico is probably as a little kid jumping on the Greyhound coming down to Mexicali to visit my father and many of the cousins that I had here in the neighborhood. And to be here to present to you, I think, on some of these very important items that you're thinking about the future for the district and for the community, it's a distinguished pleasure again. And so with that, I want to make reference to the presentation that you have in your packets. What I'm going to be covering here is slightly different than what you had initially been provided. As you had known previously in your communications with my colleague Greg, most of our focus had been talking about state aid and how you can essentially optimize the amount of resources to the district up and above a bond program. I think that's the way CFW approaches capital programs. It is really looking at the multitude of resources that are available and how you can leverage local dollars with state aid money to make sure, one, that we get our fair share, and two, to complete additional projects to get more of our needs met. Okay? With that, I'll just jump straight into the presentation. And first, as an overview of Caldwell Flores Winters, CFW has been practicing in facilities consulting services exclusively for California school districts for nearly 30 years. And over the course of those 30 years, we've been able to successfully work with over 200 districts throughout the state. Okay? And we have served a variety of school districts, primarily mid to small-sized school districts. A lot of the growth and history of the firm is really working in places like the Imperial Valley, like the Central Valley of California, the mid-Central Coast, where we had found that through the course of the 90s, there was a void and really an absence of perceived value, I think, by other consulting firms that did some of this work. Obviously, our communities do need some professional services, quality professional services, and certainly the work that we do helps to provide one of the largest forms of investments, capital investments in not only the infrastructure, but certainly in supporting the educational needs of schools. And so with that, we have worked with, as I mentioned, with over 200 school districts. And through the course of our work, we provide not only financial advisory services, but as I mentioned earlier, we also do state aid, planning services, and implementation services. CFW is the only firm of this type that does what we call a full integrated service approach. Whereas other firms may talk about doing planning, I think we do it in the real sense. Where other firms may only focus on, say, doing a campaign and financial advisory or just financial advisory, we think that before you can start talking about how you're going to use those dollars, we need to figure out what the vision is. And then how you can get more for your buck by making that $1 stretch further and further. And so we have been successful in implementing over 250 bond elections throughout California with full integrated service, planning, state aid, and such. As part of our work, we have leveraged over $1 billion in state aid for local districts. Okay, you'll see here on that first page, we have had a great deal of success here in the Imperial Valley. Some of our recent elections are for the McCabe Unified School District, for Calipatria, and then two successful elections for the Imperial Community College District, IVC. I want to note that through the course of those experiences, particularly working on the IVC measures, well, you participate in that electoral base and certainly the tax base. And I'll come back to that point, and which I think is very critical for purposes of what you're engaging in. Okay. What makes CFW unique? I mentioned that we are very active, the largest participating firm approaching this with a multidisciplinary lens, an integrated approach. With that, we believe that part of the work that we do and that we have done, our track record, in this case would be of greater value, I think, that any other competing firm can bring to the table. Again, it's about making those funds go further, and then two, about building on some of the existing work that has already been done. Specifically, I want to make reference to the IVC campaign. When we were in 2004 and in 2010, when we were working with the community college, we had identified as part of that work about 4,000 different supporters within your district that we called our yes file. And at that time, the gentleman, his last name escapes me, Salvador, which I believe was previously in your seat, chaired that campaign for this region. During the course of that time, we had managed to secure the greatest portion of support for the IVC, okay, comprised of this district, from your voting base. And so where we had won that election with 64% voter support, it was an overwhelming share of the voters that pushed up that positive vote that came from your district. And so now looking back to see what that list looks like, we believe that we can go back, touch those voters with a specific approach, a certain message to activate them and bring them back to the polls, okay? That is what we call our winning strategy, in part. And certainly, as I mentioned, we have had a great deal of success where many other districts have failed previously with other consultants, okay? That's what makes us different. In terms of the resources, we have 18 professionals that serve within the firm. We commit the entire resources of the firm to the district and all the expertise that they bring to the table. Again, from state aid, Greg Norman, from facilities implementation, we have practitioners, Rosa Perez out of Stanford, and then working with the Silicon Valley Community College District out there, who went through a number of iterations in implementation of services. These practitioners now are on the ground working with districts to make sure that the best practices are implemented. Okay, and again, from your perspective, understanding what it is to implement a capital program, it's not about just funding, getting the bond money and funding another 900 square foot room. It's about building the facilities that are needed to be able to achieve the educational plan and program of the district. What is the vision? That's Rosa Perez. You see there my credentials. I've been with the firm for about 10 years. I come from a background in public finance, and particularly my interest was in being able to leverage public investment for educational institutions throughout the state, and so my full commitment would be as the primary account lead in working with the district here and ensuring that all of these resources once again are available to the district if you choose to engage us. Now, a little bit about the district here. When we started taking a look at some of the unique characteristics of the district, we started to look at the community demographics. You may have seen some of these previously. In a nutshell, we believe that there are some very specific things here that make this district ripe, I think, for a potential measure. When you look at the party representation as well as the gender, age, and then certainly the race ethnicity makeup across the board, I think, you would see that there was what we would think is a tax-friendly demographic, just on its face. There's obviously you know this best in terms of what the real sensitivities are on the ground. How do folks feel about the district, the direction, the measure, any tax? Is this a good time? Where is the recession? Is it far in our rearview mirror, or is it still very much fresh in our mind? That sort of stuff. But looking at your voter characteristics here again, we think that these are similar to many other districts that we have worked with who have succeeded at the ballot box. Okay. When we apply some of the metrics in terms of what we anticipate could happen, assuming a November 2016 election, the next time that the district can implement what we call a Prop 39 election, we believe that there would be a pretty active participation from your local voter base. Here we look to the past participation, right, by analyzing similar elections in 2012 and 2014, and what happened with district voters at that time. We found that there was a greater vote participation. I think certainly that's just a measure of looking at the difference between general elections and then some primary activity. I think that as is the case statewide and even nationally, you'll find that there is a lot more energy when it comes to the general election, presidential election. Okay, so that in this case, evaluating past participation, we find that we can expect a 46% vote come November 2016. Now, what does that mean? Put in context. Under the provisions of Prop 39, we would need a 55% vote in order to successfully pass the measure. If we apply 55% of that 46% with roughly about 15,000 total voters, we find that we would need approximately 3,800 votes to win. Now, let me remind you what I had mentioned earlier about our unique voter file that we had where we had identified 4,000 friendly votes through the course of the IVC measure in 2010. Okay, these are families. Certainly, a lot of time has happened since then. Maybe some students graduated and moved on. Certainly, they might be voting now. Some families moved out. Change happens. But in this case, we believe that to be a treasure, I think, in terms of adding value as you go out and launch this strategic communication campaign to raise awareness and activate folks as you move towards November 2016. Here on on page 6, you see some greater detail with respect to your registered voter base. Just some additional color here that I'd like to point out, and specifically the number of homeowners that make up the registered voter base, roughly about half of your voters. Okay, so when we look at homeowners, you think about what the differences between property owners, making obviously an assumption there in terms of who's going to be paying for this tax bill, and then also segregating the renters. It's a big dynamic that comes into play when we talk about who's going to be taxed and who's going to be paying, who receives the benefit and such. Something that we would continue to study under a closer microscope if and when the district decided to move forward. Okay. As we go to page 7, here we cover some items regarding a voter survey. It's always good to first go to your community to see how they feel about the district and the direction that it's heading in, how they feel or perceive certain needs, certain priorities, and are those in line with the district? most recently, I think you folks had just undertaken a master planning process. As part of that process, you had uncovered roughly about 190 million or so in total capital project needs. That is a large list. It is a very expansive list, and so thinking about how you can organize that to prioritize over time to have the bigger impact, certainly with respect to your educational goals, but also in terms of the education, the community's priorities, I think would be something that we would evaluate through the course of a survey. We believe that a survey would be a primary tool before you go out and spend any district resources, to be able to glean as to what the pulse is of the community. Again, the recession is that too recent still? How do we feel about our property values? How do we feel about the money management within the district? And so we would get this information and do it through the course of this survey to be able to start formulating the scope and the goals and means of a potential campaign measure. If we did implement a program, you see how CFW approaches campaigns. I believe that no community is like another. We don't offer a cookie cutter approach. I think I've heard that in some instances, there's just a game plan. I think, it's a 1, 2, 3 laundry list of check off items that some of these firms lead with. For us, it's really about understanding, again, what the community perceives as being the big need, what the district certainly needs, and then how you can merge those. And then first and foremost, to start developing some understanding, education, outreach, and education. I think for us is primary through the course of the campaign. We lead that communication effort through a series of phone banks, different messaging, mailers, and direct contact, which we believe is the highest impact, greatest value in terms of being able to engage potential voters. Okay. Now, as we talk about a potential bond measure, we look at some preliminary figures in terms of what we believe is available to the district today. Again, I'm sure you've reviewed some of these figures with some of the prior firms that presented to you. We believe that applying what would be the statutory limit in terms of a potential tax rate under Prop 39 that says that a unified school district can levy a maximum tax rate of $60 per 100,000. That translates into about $43 million for the district today. And what governs that number is a series of assumptions that we make, okay? We say, okay, over time, the tax base is going to grow by this much. Over time, tax rates are going to adjust by this much. It's all fluid. I think that the way we choose to engage in a real sum of what a potential bond program can do is first to study, put our planning hats on, study the community, see where the areas of growth are, and how we can continue to supplement with information so that we get the best program for the district. Once you go out to voters and you put a measure on the ballot and then pass the measure, that is set in stone, and we are restricted by the amount of bonds that become available to the district at that point. It's referred to as an authorization. It's a voter authorization that cannot be exceeded by the district at any point. So how you arrive at the amount of dollars that you ask for is going to be critical. Obviously, we want to ask for as much as possible to make sure that we realize that $190 million capital program, as much as we can of it. And we want to ask for enough, but still be politically viable as we talk to voters, okay? And so when we talk about a bond program, Again, studying the dynamics within the community to inform these figures. And then secondly, and most importantly, I mentioned earlier, leveraging these dollars with other state money. We believe that the prospect of a statewide bond election is very likely in 2016, and we believe that that's going to be a critical piece of this capital program for the district. I'll pass it over to Greg here, and he'll take us through. If I can direct you to slide 13.
Thanks, Miguel. Like Miguel had mentioned, the integration of all of the different funding sources is key to any successful program. To maximize the dollars that are available to the district. And what CFW has done, not only within this particular county, but throughout the state, is we have assisted school districts in making sure that every available dollar that the school district is eligible for, that we tap into those funds. The state is in partnership with districts. It's actually in the state constitution as it relates to the state's role in assisting districts in their capital facilities needs. The program that most of you are probably familiar with is the Leroy Green Act in 1976. That's when the particular partnership between the state and the district really blossomed. And more districts throughout the state started to use the state's partnership and the percentage of funds that were available to enhance their local resources. Currently, the state offers a 50-50 match for any new construction project that a district has. So if in your $190 million facility master plan, there is a need for a new facility, which also includes the acquisition of land. That's also something that the state will also participate on a 50-50 basis to provide funds so that the district can acquire the property in which to build a brand new facility. It's a 50-50 match, and the district's match can come from a local bond source like you have heard tonight, comes from developer fees, general fund. There's many different areas in which a district can tap into their match. So the state will contribute 50%. On a modernization project, the partnership is 60-40, with the state contributing 60% towards any modernization project that you may have as part of your facility master plan. In order to qualify for that, a permanent classroom facility has to be at least 25 years old, which when we get into more of the statistics, I have already done some research, and I know that you do have several districts, several campuses that are already eligible for that state contribution. And the district only has to contribute 40%. With the portable classrooms, the age is 20 years. So all of your portable classrooms that are on your campuses that are 20 years old or older, we can receive funds from those particular portables. And each portable typically generates a little bit over $100,000 in eligibility for a district. So what we do at CFW is we do an extensive analysis of your district inventory. I call it the three-legged stool. There's three ways to get eligibility. We take a look at your 5-year enrollment history. Then we do a cohort analysis of that 5-year enrollment history to determine the trend. And then there's a factor, a state factor that is applied to that to determine what are going to be the district's needs. That's the first thing that we will take an analysis of. The second thing that we will do an analysis of is your existing inventory of your classrooms. It's what I call the 25% rule. Basically, the state states that if your overall inventory, if your portable inventory exceeds 25% of your total inventory, even though that particular child has a seat, has a teacher, gets lunch, they consider that particular student to be unhoused, and they will give you new construction eligibility if your percentage of portable classrooms exceed 25%. So we will do an analysis, an extensive analysis of that as well. The third leg of the three-legged stool is we will engage your city and your county in determining what developments do they have on the boards as far as new housing developments. And it's within a 5-year period. So even though it's 5 years down the road, the state is willing to give you the monies today in order to build the facilities to be prepared for when that development comes online. And for a unified district, you get 0.7 pupils for every housing unit. So it's significant. And what a lot of districts overlook is looking underneath each and every one of these rocks to unearth 50 pupil grants here, 125 pupil grants there, and it all adds up. To give you an example, for a elementary pupil, it's $10,378 per pupil. And for a high school pupil, it's $13,700 and some odd dollars. So it's a significant amount of money that adds up very, very quickly. So we will do that analysis, try to maximize the eligibility that the district has. And on page 13, our initial analysis has already unearthed over $22 million that the district is currently eligible for today in new construction eligibility. So as Miguel and the other companies that you've heard the presentations for today, this evening, that is the local contribution. What CFW does, which I'm quite sure this is probably the first time, I won't assume too much, but probably no other of the presentations has mentioned state aid. Like Miguel has talked about, CFW is an integrated firm that has many different disciplines. And so the state aid, we match it with whatever local resources, whatever local eligibility that you have. And that is critical because the timing of when you tap into your local bonds determines how much state aid you can get because of the match program. And so the sequencing of when you let your bonds, when you apply for the state aid is absolutely positively critical. Okay? And so that is something that we bring to the table as far as our participation in helping the district in their facility needs. On the modernization,
Just a question real
Sure.
quick.
Okay.
You mentioned something about the state facilities aid or state aid.
yes, state aid.
As far as the application being open
Yes.
already.
Mhm.
We were under the assumption that the application process or that the application wasn't open yet.
Right now, the state is operating under what is called emergency regulations. And basically what that means is that in order to get in line with the available resources that the state has as far as their bonding capacity, you have to certify under two different scenarios. You have to certify that you have your 50% match, and you have to certify that you can be under construction within 90 days. There are 3 waiting lists currently in effect at the state. There's some technical names for them, but basically, if you had your application in before November 1st of 2012, you were in one group. If you had your application in after November 1st, 2012, but before July, you were in a second group, and then the last group is the third group. And so the first group is assured of funding. But what is happening is that a lot of the districts that are on that list cannot certify that they have their match, and cannot certify that they can be under construction within 90 days. So they get kicked off the list, and the group that's beneath them then get elevated up. More than likely, with the district getting started today, they would be in position for the 2016 bond. And let me give you a little bit of background on the 2016 bond. As you know, there was supposed to have been a bond election, a statewide bond election in 2014. I don't know how many of you study political science, but the fact that every Republican and every Democrat voted yes for the state bond in 2014, I'm telling you, the cows were jumping over the moon when you can get all Republicans and all Democrats to vote yes on the same measure. But what happened was that the governor vetoed that particular bond at the last second because he wanted his rainy day fund ballot and the water bill to go forward, and he didn't want the competition from the statewide school bond. And the reason being there is that the history of the state bond is there's been 15 statewide bonds to date. 14 out of the 15 have passed. So if it gets on the ballot, it definitely will pass. The voters of California have shown that if there's a measure for a statewide bond, they will definitely vote for it. And so it got vetoed. Right now, there are 3 bills that are going through the legislature for a bond in 2016. Senator Liu's bill, which is Senate Bill 14, is the leader right now. It's gone through several of the committees already. So Senator Liu's bill will be more than likely will be the vehicle for a statewide bond. But what the school community has done in order to avoid what happened in 2014, they have come up with their own initiative. It's called the CQS initiative. It's already qualified for the 2016 ballot. CQS stands for California for Quality Schools, and it's going to be a $9 billion bond that has already qualified for the November 16 bond. So one way or another, either through the legislative process or through this initiative, there will be a ballot measure put before the voters, and the history shows, 14 out of 15, that it will definitely pass. So if you have a need of $190 million and some odd dollars, and you have some eligibility, which I can guarantee you once we start to dig more into the 3 legs of the 3-legged stool, we can increase the $22 million that we initially have already identified, and we can pump that number up. So the $43 million that Miguel and the other firms have talked about, we can add from a state aid perspective, maybe another $30 million. So we bring you closer to achieving your goals. And so that's what we do from the state aid portion of CFW's work. Okay? So, and when Miguel gets towards the end, he will go through all of the various things that we're proposing and looking for some direction from you as the types of things that we can perform on behalf of the district.
Thank you, Greg. And again, looking at the district's tax base and what exists in what they call the assessed value, applying a $60 tax rate, figuring out how much bond is available, I think it's a relatively simple calculation. For us, as financial consultants, that's just but one piece of the puzzle. I think that's where a lot of financial consultants, financial advisors, I should say, are relatively myopic in the sense that they would focus that as the primary revenue source. For us, we think that there's other layers of funding that are available to the district that need to be tapped into in order to optimize the program for the district. That's how we approach it. I have a lot more financial information here, but it's in the supplementary section of your presentation, and then I'll leave that with you. There's, if I can just make reference to it, some of that information relates to the largest taxpayers within the district. Okay, and certainly the history of the district's past election successes and what it's been able to achieve. One additional piece has to do with the assessed valuation and looking to see what has happened in terms of the aggregate value of taxable property within the district. One thing here, I think a finer piece of detail refers to what we call the land use. When we look at the total tax base of the district, roughly about 3/4 of that tax base is made up of single-family residential units. Okay. So that means that our homes, our families are the majority of that taxable portion of the district. And so that if we were to just divide the number of properties, number of parcels within the district by the number of households, we see that the average assessed value today for a single residence home is about $150,000, $147,000 today. And now there's a differentiation between market value, right? Whatever it's, the Century 21 is pricing it for, and then the next bidder is able to buy it for in the open market. That's one. But the assessed value is what the tax assessor from the county dictates it is based on certain provisions, right? Everyone knows Prop 13 that limits how much a tax can increase on a single family home and such. And so I mentioned the fact that the average assessed value is about $150,000 to kind of put in perspective what we believe would be the actual tax rate, assuming the maximum Prop 39 rate of $60, right? And so here, I think, when we're looking at what our families can support, who's going to pay for that tax, and then how we can structure the tax in a way that would be feasibly viable, we would create that program, test it through the course of the survey, and then put out what we call public information, right, to make sure that we generate as much support and understanding as to, all the dollars and cents. Through the course of the program, where would we start if say you folks just came back to us and said, okay, you know what, after the holidays we're ready to proceed? We put together a preliminary timeline, and you can find that on page 10. This assumes the November 2016 election. By no means is this the only opportunity available to the district. June 2016 is also available, okay? But we believe that the greatest opportunity, greatest chance in order to be able to generate the greater ballot participation will be in November at the time of the presidential election. But once we start in carrying out our study, engaging with the community, and seeing what the likelihood is of doing one or the other, we would certainly come back to the board and make a recommendation one way. But assuming a November 2016 election, here we would first initiate the capital and financing plan. We would go back, review the master plan that has already been conducted. We would conduct a series of conversations and workshops with the district to identify those key projects, and then package a series of communications to the community, test it through a voter poll, and then come back to present a final plan for board consideration and adoption. That would essentially guide the campaign measure on the ground separately by the campaign committee, okay? That would be our vision, our goal for fixing our schools via the implementation of a bond measure, okay? And certainly the complementary pieces that would fall into line, such as state aid, okay? We believe that it's never too soon to start. Typically, for a program, assuming a November 2016 timeline, we would start sometime during the holidays, come back in the new year, and then really kick off. But any questions from the board? Any thoughts, feedback? No.
Trustees, do you have any questions? No, I just had that question.
One last point here, as my colleague mentioned, we, again, and I hope we were clear in terms of our emphasis regarding the variety of services that CFW provides. Where other folks are just purely financial advisors, we are facilities consultants. As you consider your needs and services, we don't believe that we have to do it all for the district. We do believe that we have to craft something that's very narrowly tailored to meet the need of the district. It could come through a comprehensive service approach where we do the state aid, the financial consulting, the financial advisory. But it could be any one of those at the same time. And so we are happy to continue providing information to the district to see how it is that we can most complement your needs and certainly do it in a way that we believe would be at about most quality. Okay. With that, again, thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity and hope to see you again. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation.
Good night.
Good night, thank you. Well, there you have it. Presentations on our current situation, financial situation as far as bonding. So, thanks everyone for being here for these presentations. That was item H. Item I, reconvene to early closed session. No, we don't need to go back to close it. Oh, that's right. We have to go back to closed session. We have one item. So we're gonna go back to closed session and we will be right back. Thank you.